Let's begin part 2 of Pledge Segmenter by expanding the statistics section, and we'll discuss some of the fields here in this section. First, we have percent fulfillment rate. This is the percentage paid toward the total amount of the pledge. If the total amount pledged for a specific pledge is $500, for example, and the amount paid so far is $250, the pledge is 50% fulfilled. In this example, you could choose equal to as the operator and then enter a 50 in the low value field to get a list of pledges that are 50% fulfilled. You could also use greater than to get a list of the pledges that are 50% or more fulfilled. One note here, we discussed in the video on pledge setup the use of the stop date, but it's worth repeating here. The stop date for a pledge is optional, but using it or not using it has consequences. If you use a stop date, Denari knows exactly how many payments to expect. If we set the stop date at 12 months from the start date, then in our example, Denari can calculate the $25 payment times 12 and know that the total amount pledged is $300. The percent fulfillment rate is calculated based on the total amount pledged. If you don't use a stop date in the pledge, then Denari doesn't know how many payments there will be and therefore can't calculate an accurate total pledged. That then makes the fulfillment rate useless. Paid through date is sometimes difficult to understand. It is best explained by example. You have a pledge with a payment amount of $50 and the payment frequency is monthly with a start date of January 1. On January 3rd, the donor makes a $50 payment or donation. The donor's paid through date is January 1. He or she is paid up to that point. On February 1st, a second payment is now due. Until that payment is made, their paid through date remains at January 1. When they make that second payment, the paid through date will change to February 1. They are only paid up until that date. Denari calculates the next payment date based on the start date of the pledge. If the start date is 6/1/2016, then if the pledge is a monthly pledge, the next payment is due on 7/1/2016. If it's an annual pledge, the next payment is due on 6/1/2017. You can use this filter to find pledges that are due in some time period. This is frequently used to send statements as a reminder to people who donate annually. The last payment date is just that, the last date that someone gave a gift toward their pledge. Due so far is again best explained by example. You have a pledge with a payment amount of $50 and the payment frequency is monthly with a start date of January 1. On January 1, the due so far amount is $50. On February 1, the due so far amount is $100. On March 1, the due so far is $150, and so on. It is the amount that should have been paid to this point in the pledge period. Paid so far is fairly self-explanatory. It is the amount that the donor has paid toward the pledge to date. You could, for example, get a list of pledges whose paid so far is less than 0 to find pledges where the donor has not yet paid anything toward a pledge. Ahead behind we discussed earlier. It shows a comparison of what has been paid so far against what should have been paid, or the due so far. If the donor is behind in their payments, the number will be expressed as a negative number. If they're ahead in their payments, the number will be a positive one. You can use this filter to get a list of pledges that are behind by choosing less than as the operator and entering 0 in the low value field as we saw before. You will get a list of pledges whose ahead behind is less than 0 or is negative, and this field is probably the easiest way to find those pledges that are behind. The term remaining can be a little confusing. Remaining is the difference between what is due so far and what is paid so far, just like ahead behind. However, it's different in that it only expresses positive amounts. It assumes the pledge is behind. It allows you to, for example, get a list of pledges that will have a defined remaining amount. You can use greater than as the operator and enter 25 in the low value field to get a list of pledges that have more than $25 remaining. Another way to say this is that they are more than $25 behind in their pledge payments. Ahead behind seems to be a much more intuitive field to use in that regard, and that's the one that gets used most often to find pledges that are behind. Total pledge is the overall total amount of the pledge, as we discussed earlier. If a donor has pledged $50 per month for 1 year, their total amount pledged is $600. For Denari to calculate the total amounts pledged accurately, the pledge must have a stop date, as we discussed. Pledge balance is the difference between the total amount pledged and the paid so far. You might use this filter to get a list of pledges showing their balance to determine how much is yet to come. It too depends on the total pledge field and is subject to the issues with the stop date. And finally here, days past due is used quite frequently. You can use it to find pledges that are behind by a specific number of days. For example, you could select greater than as the operator and enter 30 in the low value field to find all the pledges that are more than 30 days behind. Some organizations only want to send pledge statements to those that are more than a certain number of days behind, and they use this field to do that. Once you have your filters set for your segment, it's time to select an output in the output type field. Like Gift Segmenter, most of the outputs are spreadsheet type formats, with Excel being the most popular. And like Gift Segmenter, you'll get a list of pledges, so Excel is the best option to view and manipulate the pledge data. The Excel output will include a number of fields, including all the ones we find in the pledge segment and more. Pledge Segmenter does not allow you to choose what fields will appear in the output, however. One of the output options here that is not a spreadsheet type is the EFT confirmation notice option. This harkens back to the old days when written confirmation was required for automatic EFT pledges. Today it can be done by email, and Denari has a process for that in place. It can still be used today, however, if you want to keep written permission from donors to transact their pledge payments by EFT in your files. Choose that as your option and then select a letter body here in the printed output letter field. Denari will then produce a permission statement in the PDF format that you can send to your donors. They can then sign that statement and mail it back. Denari offers a great deal of flexibility in reporting by also allowing you to link a pledge segment to other reports and statements. Let's look at some of those options. As mentioned earlier, you may only want to send pledge statements to donors who are behind in their pledges. If so, you can create a pledge segment that identifies those pledges. So now let's click on the Correspond button on the left and then Pledge Statements. And here we have the Pledge Segment field where you can select that segment, and it now becomes the filter for your statements. So Denari will produce only statements for those people who are behind. Now let's click the Reports button on the left and then Pledges. There are 3 reports here that all work in the same way: Pledge Detail Long, Pledge Detail Short, and Pledge Summary. They all produce a report in PDF format that will go to your inbox. Anytime you see the word detail in Denari, it means all pledges or all gifts. In this case, the 2 detail reports are the same, except that one has more information than the other. The summary report is just the opposite. It summarizes the data rather than showing you each pledge. You can experiment with the reports here to see the information they can give you. I'll click on Pledge Summary to show you how they work. Again, all three are the same. Down at the bottom of the page, we see the pledge segment field. So if we had created a pledge segment that gives us the pledges that are behind, this field allows us to get that information in a PDF report format, and in this case it is summarized. You could link the same pledge segment to one of the detail reports to get a list of the pledges that are behind. A feature that makes this report even more valuable is that it can be memorized by using the fields at the top of the page. That means that it can run automatically on whatever day you choose. And setting up memorized reports is covered in the video on reporting. You might decide that you want to send a letter to all the people who made a pledge at your last fundraising banquet. You could first create the pledge segment that filters on that appeal and link that to a name segment. Let's click on the Reports button on the left. And then Query Tools and Name Segmenter. And I'll just click on a segment here at random from the list. On the right here, we see the pledge segment field. This allows us to select that pledge segment and, if needed, add other filters from the name segment, and then output a list of names that can be used for our mailing. In the Gift Segmenter video, we saw how you can link a pledge segment to a gift segment. Let's look at that. Again, here I'll just select a gift segment at random. I'll slide down the page and expand the gift details section. And at the bottom we find the pledge segment field. An example of how you might use this. First, you could create a pledge segment to find all the pledges that are behind, then link that to the gift segment that is also using a gift filter to find all the gifts that were made to those pledges in that date range. So you can see the combinations here. You can put together the pledge segment and the gift segment to find a tremendous amount of information about your pledges and the giving patterns toward those pledges. And just to demonstrate how flexible the segmenters in general can be, it's possible to link a sponsored name segment to a pledge segment, which can be linked to a gift segment, which can be linked to a name segment. Or you can link a sponsored name segment to a pledge segment that can be linked directly to a name segment and skip the gift segment. I know that sounds like trying to solve a word problem in math in high school, but after you have some experience, you can begin to think in those terms and take advantage of the possibilities. This concludes this video on Pledge Segmenter. If you have any questions, please contact tech support through the help button at the top of the Denari page.